Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Ad Age's Roundtable, Debating the Upfronts. I'm Janine Poggi, Senior Editor here at Ad Age, and I will be your moderator. In the wake of COVID-19, negotiations for TV commercial time for next season have been upended. Marketers are reassessing ad budgets, and many say they are holding off committing ad dollars for the 2020-2021 season at a time of so much uncertainty. TV network sellers have said they are ready to strike deals and do business when marketers are ready. But earlier this month, the Association of National Advertisers called for the TV industry to shift the timing of the upfront negotiations to better reflect the changing needs of marketers in the current landscape, as well as for more transparency and other things that the TV industry needs to do to help move business forward. A few days later, NBC Universal's Linda Yaccarino penned a letter calling for the industry to enact bigger changes beyond the timing of deal making that includes helping fix racial injustices. Today, we're bringing together the two sides to discuss the long-term merits of shifting the timing of negotiations and how marketers and networks can work together to address much larger issues that have plagued the marketplace. So joining me today are Ben Jankowski, Group Head of Global Media at MasterCard, Linda Yaccarino, Chairman, Advertising and Partnerships at NBC Universal. And I think we have, though I'm not sure how his service picked up, Lou Pascalis, Senior VP of Customer Engagement and Media Investment at Bank of America. Hi, everyone. Lou is a circle right now, but hopefully he will join us later. But we have Ben and Linda, who I know can carry this conversation for, as long as possible. How are you both?
Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent, Janine. Thanks for having me here today. Really appreciate it.
So I want to start, there's a lot to unpack and a lot to talk about, but I do want to start with the ANA statement that was released earlier this month, calling for that shift in timing to the upfronts. Ben, can you start talking about why this is something that's important to MasterCard, but important to the industry? Why you think moving to a calendar upfront makes the most sense for your brand?
Yeah, I think that there were, first of all, thank you again for having me. There were a lot of topics that came up when we think about the upfront, and including timing is one thing, right? So there was timing. We also spent a lot of time talking about, transparency of the market and flexibility and, new metrics and things like that. And we'll talk about a lot of those things. I think now is kind of the confluence of all the pressures that we're under. I think that this year has been unusual, to say the least, for everybody, for marketers in terms of business challenges, and some marketers have actually, improved their business, and others haven't, depending upon the category. Also for consumers, I mean, media behavior, I think, television viewing, if I got my stats right, television viewing in a 3-week period went up something like, 25% in 3 weeks. So the consumer behavior has changed radically. E-commerce, we took 10 years to get 10% of all of our transactions to be in e-commerce, and it took us 8 weeks to double that number. So there's been tremendous changes in consumer behavior, and also from the media side. I mean, there's been huge disruptions. I'm a huge sports fan. Makes me crazy to not have sports. In terms of all the content, and it all comes at a time when it was the most important time for the video marketplace. So the uncertainty and the need to get more stability, get more certainty, one of the reasons why now it became a really important time to talk about all the things that we talked about. We'll spend more time talking about timing as well as all the other things.
So for as it relates to the timing part, this is really about waiting for more clarity and waiting till there's more visibility in the marketplace. Is that accurate?
It's one component, Janine. I think other components are, it just syncs up better with most marketers work on, I think most of our media owner, partners work on a calendar year basis anyway. So we just thought it was a better time frame. Actually, I don't have the exact number, and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but already a large, not a large percentage, there's a material percent of deals that have already been done on the calendar and have been done that way forever. And I think that, we just thought it was more important to make our community, make the advertising, the marketer community aware of what the options and challenges were, because it's a really difficult time to be able to, get your hands around what's going to happen, a year from now.
Right. So, Lou, do you think that we need to shift as an industry then to a calendar upfront? As Ben said, many marketers are already doing this and, have been doing this. Can we just have, marketers go on a case by case basis? Who's ever ready to do business now moves ahead. And those that, want to wait. Is there a reason for actually saying, let's all shift to a calendar basis?
So I think, from my perspective, there are certain advantages for certain marketers on a calendar, but I think what's happened is that this issue has been sort of consolidated around one issue, which is calendar, where I think from where I sit, there are opportunities in currency, there are opportunities in measurement, there are opportunities in dynamic scheduling that are part and parcel. And I think when the conversation started at the ANA, we were looking at this as an extraordinary time where, very quickly production was, to Ben's point, production of originals was shut down. Sports became an enormous question mark. And it seemed to be the opportunity to retool with the least amount of risk to the overall marketplace. I think at its core, the upfront works very well. It has worked very well as a construct for years. It's not just about the buying modalities. It's also about seeing programming and having the opportunity to sort of handicap the marketplace, if you will, and think about what works best for you as a marketer, from a context, from a timing, from an audience standpoint. And Linda and I have been talking, I think, for, I hate to say it, decades, about changing the currency that is more representative of the value you get from TV versus other media. And our impetus was really opening a dialogue to engage on multiple fronts, but it sort of became around calendar. And certainly for me, calendar is better, but for others it might be different. And we've been doing multi-quarter deals for a long time that weren't tethered to traditional timing.
So this isn't about saying that, you guys or those who, sign this ANA statement or are part of it are willing to or prepared to actually sit out of this year's marketplace. Is that correct?
That certainly wasn't my take.
No, I'm sorry. It certainly was not meant to be a binary statement that we're going to flip a switch and move everybody from X to Y. Because again, today, as Lou said, and many marketers have, and depending upon your deal with different partners, some have short-term, couple-week deals in the scatter marketplace. Some have multi-year deals. It was never meant to be we're going to congeal the whole market into the same time frame. It was meant to be in this environment. We thought it would be, a better opportunity for a large number of marketers who work on the calendar year to, be able to understand the opportunity to be able to work in an environment where they'd have more ability to, have a better chance of knowing what they were going to, situation they were in.
Linda, of course, for you and NBCU, this has been something that you've been vocal about for a while now, pushing change and innovation. What do you make at this period of time with all of the uncertainty in the marketplace? Are you seeing the willingness for marketers to do change? How are you prepared to work with brands at this point with so much uncertainty to help do these things?
Well, thank you. And according to Lou, and I think Ben, I think I've been bothering them at least for a decade and pushing to change. But I think Lou mentioned something that's really, really important. And he was specific about, while the ANA's position is about timing, but it really was about the importance of the upfront and the coalescing of the industry to come together for change, because the upfront is probably the most effective trading mechanism, I would argue, in all of the world. When you're looking at $20-30 billion being transacted in a very organized period of time, it really impacts every single piece of our business, from planning, to Lou's point, to production. So delaying it or pausing it based on the structural and foundational changes that have been forced by COVID and a couple of other very, very important things speak to what I talked about in my op-ed, whether it is the COVID crisis or the must-need coalescing of the industry, rallying together for social change. I think it's worth taking a beat and figuring out what are the best practices that we could put in place. it's not just timing of the trading practices. I would maybe up Lou and Ben's antes a little bit, because it's not just when we do business, it's how we do business. That does include currency. It does include measurement. Look at the quality of production innovation that's happened over the last 14, 15 weeks or so. I would argue about 10 years of innovation happened over those weeks of time. But I would also urge the industry to come together and actually start trading based on the way the consumer behaves. And that is an all-screen marketplace that's fully transparent and based on trust. And that's something that the TV upfront marketplace really enjoys, which is open marketplace where trust and safe content is really not an issue. It's actually a gift when you invest in that marketplace.
And I think and I'm speaking on behalf of Lou, sorry, Gene, I cut off a question. I think we all agree with that. I mean, obviously, the devil's in the details, as it always is, but I think that we're all aligned, and I think that it's interesting how timing is one of the issues that we think there's an opportunity, but it's only one of the issues. And I would agree with everything Linda just said, and there's a lot of things for us to find ways to collaborate on in terms of how we trade, in terms of how we represent, the consumers. There's a lot of opportunity. I think it's also a really exciting time. I think that heretofore it was driven by individual brands, and I think the industry, getting together. I think the ANA, not to give too much of a plug, but under Bob Leedys and Mark Pritchard's leadership, we've been a lot more active, and with Lou and some of our peers, we've been a lot more active about trying to kind of drive change and have a little bit more control over what we're trying to do. So I think we're really trying to drive action steps. So I think we're on the right path.
So let's drill that down a little bit. So if we were to take a beat right now and think about what are some of the changes that can realistically take place this year at this time, what are some things that all three of you are really focused on pushing through at this point? Lou, you want to start with that?
Sure, I'll go. I'm very bought into the idea that the currency that we use, the impression metric at its core, is really a legacy of a time gone by. And, there are a wide variety of thoughts about what that currency could be. Bill Konigsberg from Horizon Media really believes that the opportunity is to base it on outcomes or performance. I think that'd be challenging to measure, but I always listen to Bill. At the same time, I know from my own measurement that an impression delivered in television is worth far more than an impression delivered in social media in terms of readability and true business impact. And I think for me, it's really coming up with either an alternative currency or maybe a suite of currencies that can be transacted on, which better reflect fair value and I think benefit the broadcast community, and will also help us to really invest our dollars where they're having the biggest impact, and not based on some conveniently measured but ultimately less effective metric like an impression thought.
Linda, you and I have talked about this for a while now. Why aren't we at a place where there is a new metric? Like, what's holding things up, and what will help us get to a place where we can actually transact in this way?
I can see Ben smiling. I don't know if he's going to or across your head, you're going, oh my God, there she goes.
No, I'm curious to see.
So I think it's a combination of things of why aren't we there yet? The first and most important reason is because we keep grading ourselves on the old report card. So that's an old report card based on adults 18 to 49 in large part, or a demo that does not reflect the value of television or the consumer behavior because it's only relegated to a singular network in a singular time period that is so rigid and finite, it doesn't reflect consumer behavior. So I think the industry, it might be an interim step, and I think this is where maybe Lou is going, is let's start buying on demos or audiences that you're looking to buy or invest in. And we will be able to demonstrate the value on the KPIs that matter to marketers the most. And whether it is reach, like Mark Pritchard has been very, very vocal about, and companies like NBC Universal are fully leaning into making guarantees like that, or to a more specific segment that leads to sales, or can demonstrate or look at attribution in a very, very different and sophisticated way. So why aren't we there yet? We keep grading ourselves by the old report card, and we're not going to get there if it's a rate of change on a network, on a day part, that time has gone by. And we're going to have to embrace innovation in metrics and currency that we believe in. And that's where we believe as partners that we believe in. Right now, there's not one metric that the whole industry can support. Yeah. But it's certainly verifiable and transparent. If you look at something like C-Flight that NBC Universal worked with Nielsen on, that we're able to bring together both digital video, guaranteed verified performance, along with the Nielsen ratings that we know today. So we're taking some steps. We need full industry support to do that.
How much of this can be done during this time, as if we are going to pause a little to start upfront negotiations, maybe to talk more about this? Can this get done during this year's negotiations, no matter when they happen?
I think first of all, I want to throw another reason why things haven't been done as quickly as you want. And I'll be a little bit controversial, and some of my marketing friends will throw stones at me. I don't think marketers have been aggressive enough. I think we've kind of been too laid back and wait for the marketplace to change. And if we haven't driven change, it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen by magic, right? So Mark Pritchard mentioned it last year, the 2019 ANA media conference. He mentioned when he's trying to drive change, he's finally realized he's one of the biggest advertisers, if not the biggest advertiser in the United States. But that still only represents 5% of the market, maybe between 5 and 10% of the market. So until marketers, have a consistent common set of goals that we want to drive towards, it's not going to change. You mentioned a really interesting point about like what's going to happen now versus what's going to happen. Another point, I agree with Lou about targets. I also think the issue of flexibility. When we work in an environment, some of the other media types we work with, we have a lot more flexibility. And I think especially now, that's a major issue with marketers. I think that if you look at digital or even local television, generally speaking, I have a lot more flexibility. Now, there's a lot of really good reasons for it, and both sides benefit and have risk in the same way. And I'm not suggesting it's clearly not a one-sided argument. I would like to think we can make progress on flexibility, because right now it's a little bit it's pretty the legacy system that we have of having options due 90 days prior to the start of the quarter. It's a little bit antiquated for most marketers. And again, there's a lot of middle ground that has to be had there. I think that's something that we can probably sort through. Hopefully we can sort through and address in a shorter time frame than some of the bigger, some of the bigger ones are going to take a little bit more time.
I would just add.
Go ahead. Sorry. I'll go after you.
Ladies first. No.
Thank you.
Lindsay, can you address it? Because I'm wondering how NBCU is looking at flexibility.
Well, first of all, let's all acknowledge the current macro of the upfront market that's starting to form. So in a market where there's softer volume potentially to be had, although we feel every week that goes by more and more optimistic as the country opens and the economy improves, although with considerable uncertainty. I think this is a marketplace where certain updated options will be negotiated. So all of those conversations are going on because that's also reflective of marketer needs based on consumer behavior. We have to pivot, right? We have to pivot more quickly, and we need more time in sight of uncertainty. But I would also argue the flip side of what's been really, really frustrating is the efforts of the TV marketplace to be to be based on the fundamentals of trust, transparency, and really meaningful collaboration, that we're trying to make these changes when marketers transact on the tech platforms in closed marketplaces with such limited visibility that when there's an entire marketplace that's dedicated to open marketplace and innovation development to address legacy trading practices, that's where it gets frustrating. So maybe this is the moment to take advantage of it.
Now that you just said that, I do want to quickly discuss, of course, like after, the ANA made their statement, a lot has changed miraculously. If more can change, I don't know, in the last couple of months. But given the recent Facebook boycott and conversation around social media and the tech platforms, for Lou and Ben, like, does this change how you are looking at the TV marketplace?
I hate to do this. I really want to go back to the comment Ben made, because I think it's really important before we jump to that. I think marketers do need to do a better job of getting to measurement that matters across channels, not within a channel. And I think that also connects up to Linda's point. We're looking at different channels with very different lenses, and we haven't decided on a currency. And there's another actor in this play that we haven't mentioned yet. I think we make it very hard for agencies to allow innovation because they understand the optimization based on price, and they've been very good at transacting on that modality for 60 years.
Yeah, agreed.
We're now advocating for a move to something better without defining what that something better is, and I really think we have work to do to say, okay, the new common currency that will allow trade-offs across different channels and will really start to expose the relative value of some channels and the relative inflation on other channels is this, or are these things. That's going to take a concerted effort by marketers to sort of migrate away from the familiar and invest time in coming up with that alternative currency. There's a lot of initiatives in the industry, but I don't think that they're really truly broad enough to start to make the migration that we all know we need to make.
No, and I think.
Can you talk about the question too about the social platforms in terms of, is it making you think differently about TV and how you approach TV?
So, for Bank of America, we have not changed our investment strategy in social platforms. We might take that on in the future, but for right now, we are status quo.
Ben, thoughts on that and how it might influence your thinking about the TV marketplace?
The types of things that we're talking about in terms of, so the question is, does the other changes in the environment impact what we're talking about in this conversation? And I don't, there's so many things going on with this conversation around. There's so many things that we have to tackle. These are, the things that we're trying to tackle are unique to the television marketplace, and for the topic that we're talking about today, we're really focused on helping drive that. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, all the changes we're talking about, it's interesting we're talking about them now at a time of so much uncertainty, and we keep saying that. Is there a willingness from brands to actually make changes during this time? Is it about sticking to the tried and true, or do you think there will be a willingness to actually do this now when, quite frankly, I mean, you guys have both said it, that there was sort of an unwillingness maybe to change over the last couple of years. So why now? Why would it be any different now?
I think that's a great question. And I think that, I think in the last couple of years, marketers have done a better job of aligning on key topics. If it were things like, some examples, things like brand safety, the formation of things like GARM, things like cross-media measurement. We started to kind of talk about it. We could spend a couple days talking about cross-media measurement. That's another thing that the ANA is actively involved with. How can we equally, and Linda kind of talked about it, we're working really hard so that we can compare impression for impression, really understand. Lou made the point earlier today that TV impression is worth exponentially more. That might not have been his exact word than a social media impression. We're working to try to figure out how do we measure that. So there's a lot of parts of this that I think in the last couple of years, marketers have been more organized and more driven around how can we find some common solutions. So I guess I have hope. And again, as the co-chair of the ANA Media Committee, I have to have that hope. I guess we're making progress, and I think that marketers have been organized differently than we have been in the past, and that's why I have more hope. And
So,
Yeah.
Linda, if we're all in agreement here, it seems like all of you are on the same page to me. If that's true, then what comes next?
I think what comes next, and I have to say I'm really, really encouraged about our work together with the ANA. Again, back to one of the core values in our industry is really meaningful collaboration, and NBCU is really committed to driving change. That being said, we have to acknowledge right now everything has changed. Structural, foundational change in every one of our businesses. So if we don't use that as permission to change, it's never going to happen because the stakes are way too high. And for all of our businesses, and particularly as a company that has a broadcast network, right? We have an obligation to the American citizens to deliver content and value that is meaningful, is safe, is trusted. And right now is the time that we will actually lean in and become more innovative and work hand in hand with the ANA and marketers to deliver value that they prioritize. So I think for the first time in a long time, our strategic priorities are aligned. And I think what's important is that I hope you invite me back next year. I hope it's in person, but I really want to sit alongside Lou and Ben and talk about what we actually accomplished, right? This is what we achieved, because Lou, I know, is sick of talking to me. He says for over a decade, it's time to do something.
Yeah, and Lou, what do you think, if anything were to happen this year and come out of this time period, what is one feasible thing that you think can actually change?
I think realistically, because we've been at this talk point now for about 90 days, I think we should agree on a set of go forward principles and a group of representatives, buy side, sell side, agency side, that is empowered and has the backing of not just the ANA and the IAB and the MMA and the 4As, but the major marketers here to come up with a new framework. I don't think we'll be able to implement that framework because sports are starting to come online, people are making deals today, but I think we really should, to Linda's point, come up with a framework that we want to solve for, and then agree by the time we're at the next upfront, whenever that is, whether it's a calendar upfront or whether it returns to legacy timing, make real progress on that framework. But that's, I think, what we should hold ourselves accountable for.
And Ben, your thoughts on what you hope to see come out of this time?
Yeah, I think that we can make. I think there's some low hanging fruit. I think in Linda, and again, it's not simple. Requires give and take on both sides. I think things like flexibility. I happen to think that that's that's a quicker solve. That won't take months and months of technology and all kinds. There's some of the things that are pretty big asks. So I think flexibility is a little bit of an easier one. Luke talked about currency. I think there's some easier, lower hanging fruit. I think some marketers will make progress in that space quicker than others, even as quick as this year in this year's upfront. But again, I think that we talked about it's a journey. There's a lot to do, right? And I think that it's a journey. The mistake we fall into is I think we're beyond the point of just like talking blah blah blah. And we also want to drive action. We want to cut the elephant into manageable size pieces, and it's a journey. And we're excited that let's knock off a couple things now and then move on to some of the bigger issues.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to hold you all to it. 1 year from now, hopefully in person, we will see what comes out of this time, and hopefully we'll see some changes. Thank you all so much for joining me today. As always, thank you to our Ad Age crew, Alfred Mascaroni, Anna Sekula, Max Sternlicht, and Elise Liffring for making this live stream happen. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, Janine.
Thanks, Janine. Good to see you guys.
Everyone.
Take care.
Stay well.
Bye.